Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lee Shoquist. I'm the Director of Marketing for Campbell & Company, and welcome to our webinar, Is Staff Turnover Holding You Back? Building High-Performance Development Teams in Human Services Organizations. It's one of many in our complimentary webinar series that we'll be doing this year. And today we're coming to you from a few different places. We're broadcasting live from Chicago, Washington, D.C., and Seattle. So thanks so much for joining us. Before we begin today's presentation, I'd like to just go over a few logistics with you. First of all, close any programs that you may have running on your computer, of course, other than the one running right now. Go to webinar. Dial in using a telephone instead of your computer speakers, and please move your cell phone away from your computer. If you experience any visual issues, send a chat to Campbell & Company or contact GoTo at 800-263-6317. Finally, today's webinar will last about 60 minutes, and each of you attending will earn a continuing education credit. It's good for your participation with CFRE International. Later today, you're going to also receive an email from GoToWebinar that includes information on how to download your certificate, as well as a PDF of the presentation slides that we're going to go through today. And finally, the webinar is being recorded, so you'll receive a link to today's recording. We do welcome you to submit questions throughout the duration of the webinar today. You can type those into the question box in the GoToWebinar control panel. If we can work your question in during the course of our discussion, we certainly will do so. Sometimes, though, we will hold off and get your question at the end of the webinar during our formal Q&A period. Next, I'd like to introduce our panel facilitators for today. Marian Alexander DeBerry, she's the Director of the Executive Search Practice, leading the practice here at Campbell & Company, and her colleague Chris Landon McFeely, who is a Senior Consultant and very senior member of the Executive Search Practice here as well. Chris?
Thank you. I'd like to take the opportunity right now to welcome our panelists today. We have three great panelists to add to the discussion. Val Brody, Tom LeClaire, and Michelle McDaniel. Welcome today. Val has 30 years of experience in fundraising and development for nonprofit organizations across a variety of sectors: higher ed, healthcare, human services, as well as consulting over the years. She's currently the Vice President for Development and Public Affairs at Planned Parenthood of Metropolitan Washington, D.C., and we're very happy that she's here to discuss this topic with us today. Here in our Chicago office with us is Tom LeClaire, who is the Vice President of Development for Easter Seals Metropolitan Chicago, where he's been for the last 3 years, and before that he was the Chief Development Officer for 10 years at the Hope Institute. And in all total, Tom has almost 30 years of development fundraising experience under his belt as well. So welcome, Tom. And Michelle McDaniel is joining us from Seattle, Washington. We're very pleased to have her. She's the Chief Development Officer with Fair Start in Seattle, where she's been for the last 2.5 years. Prior to that, she was with the Red Cross of Western Washington as the Chief Development Officer. And we're very hopeful that everyone can join in with a lot of stories and additions to our discussion today. Thank you for being here.
Great. So the topics that we hope to cover today are going to be around high-performing development teams in human services organizations, starting with what really makes a high-performing development team, how to think about attracting, cultivating, and retaining high performers, and then, preparing for CDO and development staff succession and transition. So I think to kick this discussion off, to really frame it a bit with some context, we may want to talk for a moment as a group about how the human services talent landscape has changed in the last several years.
Thanks, Lee. What we know is that the talent landscape has certainly changed, and also what expectations are about what we believe to be high performance has changed. Some things also are the same. There's also a need to be highly collaborative, focused on the mission, having an ability to work in teams, And while there have been some changes, there is some sameness about it. And so I think it'll be really interesting to dig into this and take it apart a bit and see what perspectives are both across human services and frankly geographically, to see if there are some differences.
So I think as you, as attendees know, we sent around a brief survey in the last couple of days, and we're going to cover some of the responses from that survey, which were quite interesting, and we have quite a robust response, so that's going to inform some of our discussion as we continue here. But I think we want to start with talking about what we call the link between high-performing teams and successful fundraising. So really, when you have a high-performing development team, what can you expect on the fundraising side? How does that picture look different? Val, I know you have some thoughts around this topic that you want to share with the group.
Val, are you still with us?
Val, perhaps you're muted. We'll give you a moment, and maybe you can unmute if that's the case.
Hello, can you hear me?
Val, there you are.
Okay. Sorry about that, everyone. This is my first time doing one of these, so I hope I don't screw it up. I think one of the most important things about this question is what's the potential result of having a high-performing team is actually the word team. Whether you're part of a fundraising team or if it's just you, if it's you and your CEO, or if you're the vice president for advancement at a large nonprofit or at a university with many staff reporting to you, it's been my experience that no single person, no matter how beloved they may be, whether they're the founder of an organization or whatever, he or she is not able to find donors, make friends with them, raise all the resources, manage the acknowledgement and stewardship process alone. Our work always requires a team. And all of our teams are not always going to be in the development office. So I think it's important as we're thinking about high-performing fundraising operations that we consider both our staff internal, our CEOs, and also our colleagues in the program areas, as well as our volunteers, our boards, and others who should be a part of a high-performing fundraising team.
Geez, Val, excellent points, and certainly agree with you. And Tom LeClaire, certainly agree with you. I'd like to find that CEO that could do all those things. It'd be nice to work with he or she. But agreed. I was saying yesterday to a group that as far as the teamwork and the credit always becomes an issue. And I always say it's not one person that does it. It's exactly what you said. It's everybody being a part of that team, and everybody being a part of the rewards of that major gift or final dollars raised. So yes, I agree with you. It's teamwork. Everybody's a part of it, and from a small, and I've been in those small shops too, and I've only had 10 people working for me, but you couldn't have said it better.
This is Michelle in Seattle. I just wanted to, again, jump on what they're saying. A couple things to add. I think it's going to be overused potentially, but I think the term cultural philanthropy really does speak to what we're talking about in my mind. And for me, I define that as the organization from the board to the line staff, to everyone involved, even your volunteers, has some shared ownership of the idea of philanthropy being something that allows the organization to move forward. And that philanthropy can be in the form of not just treasure, not just financial, but time and talent. And the more that we foster that and actually structure it into the organization, for example, I have a philanthropy committee that's made up of part board members, part other volunteers, and of course I have a board of directors. And what we're doing is we're developing a portfolio for each one of those members. They have about 5 to 7 people that they're responsible for. They have a liaison from the development department to be able to have to support them, to help with strategy, to mentor them. But we literally are having, we're broadening the number of foot soldiers, so to speak, by literally having folks share their responsibility and ownership across the board to the staff. And the other thing I would add too is just the internal team culture within development. You know, we really try to focus on making sure that nobody feels like they are alone. My events manager is not the sole person responsible for pulling off that $1 million gala. That you know, we have somebody who is, you know, responsible for the volunteer engagement, in that they're in this together with them. There's a team that helps with procurement and so forth. That no one person is kind of out there on their own.
Could you explain more about the foot soldier? I mean, I love the concept, but the trouble that I have with the board is the expectation is it's on the development team. I love the portfolio of 5 to 7 clients. Could you go more into that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, this only happens with the buy-in of the the CEO, of course, and the board president and the executive leadership. But I think particularly if an organization is not bringing in on a regular basis to the board what's happening in the fundraising as much as the other aspects of the organization, it's easy for them to become disconnected, to think, well, you know, it's all handled, like you were saying. So, you know, we've had conversations around, you know, our board is not only a fundraising board, but fundraising needs to be part of it to have a well-rounded leadership. And so part of our culture that we have grown into is that the board is there to not only approve the budgets and to, you know, be able to give input on strategy. They have over time, and we also make sure that when we're recruiting for board members that they understand that fundraising, philanthropy is a big part of what they're expected to participate in. So some of this is really making sure the CEO and your board leadership understand the importance of it, that this is about not just the ask. That is one part of the holistic component of fundraising, and a vast majority of it simply is building relationships. So we also try to make sure that we don't go right into the, hey, you're going to be sitting next to us and making an ask. That there's so much more to fundraising that actually, if it's done well, you know, that ask, you don't even have to do much at that point. So it is not an easy fix, particularly if there's a board who feels nervous about fundraising. For a lot of them, it's very scary. So there's time that we need to take in to get the buy-in, but also to demystify some of the concerns about it, and then also make sure that folks know that we're there to support them as board members, which is why they have a staff liaison, that they're not out there on their own.
Yeah, interesting.
And this is Val again. I just want to jump in and to comment on what Michelle has just said and bring it back to the topic for today, and that is about staff retention. Having those kinds of connections, for me at least, having the staff understand and participate in identifying those volunteer leaders and having those relationships with the donors, solicitors, or cultivators, however you are using them, really is another way of empowering our staff to be frontline fundraisers, to have relationships with the key leaders in our organizations, and I think really does help them to understand how important what we do is from day to day, because they're actually out there teaching somebody else to be a fundraiser.
And the other thing I'll add to that, and this is true for our board as well as thinking about the development staff, we really must make sure that everyone is really connected to the mission. We're not fundraising for fundraising's sake. You know, no money, no mission, no mission, no money. But at the end of the day, if it's not something that people are connected to, then it's going to feel like more of it's just going to be more of a challenge, and that's going to resonate to the donors as well and prospective donors. And again, I also put in volunteers in that same pool. We have to make sure that we understand the importance of connecting people to the why and making that really powerful. And we're not going to be able to retain folks, particularly if there's really high goals, if things aren't if we're still in a growth period, for example, just based on the mission, but people need to feel that connection.
Great. Mm-hmm. So as I mentioned earlier, and most of you have probably seen this week the survey around these topics, and we look at this data here. Those of you who are in attendance today, when we asked a question about how high performing do you think your development teams are, 52% of you said, high or even above that, but 36% of you were there in the middle, with an average indicating that there is some room for improvement, and certainly on the lower end, 12% of those who responded said that they have significant room to improve performance of development staff team. So as we move along here and think about the things that make a high-performing development staff, and we look at some of the results that we received as well, if we can build through this slide. Some of the things that we see here are clear, motivating vision, goals, and measure for success, definitions around roles in the work processes during the development process, open communication and accountability, and cross-functional cooperation are all things that were important to creating a development team. But one thing that did stick out as being extremely important, 100% of respondents said important or of very, very high importance. I think around 75% said high importance was this idea of culture and tying development staff to the culture of the organization. So I think it would be interesting to hear from the panel what their thoughts are on maybe some of these results here, others they may think of, and their thoughts on culture.
Go ahead. Sorry.
This is Michelle. I'll just jump in real quick, and then I think it was Tom who was also about to speak. I think the first thing is certainly you want to hire for skill. But the other is you need to hire for culture, and the culture really is the way we do things. And I think one of the most difficult things is to be able to define culture first in order to be able to show there's a match. So that was my 2 cents, and I'll turn over. I think Tom wanted to mention something.
You have to give more than 2 cents. Yeah.
Believe me, I am.
Yeah. Culture, I know in hiring for me, and I don't know if skill is necessarily as important as mission driven. I'd rather teach and train an individual to be the best that they can be at whatever discipline within development that they want to be. But the culture is so important. If you can't get the culture correct amongst your own team, it's surely difficult to tie the CEO in and the finance department and even the programs. But I find the mission driven is key. When I hire somebody, it's very important that they get out and spend a day in program, spend 5 days, spend 10 days in program. I'm of the thinking it's very difficult to promote the mission to a donor if you're only reading about that mission in your marketing materials. You need to eat and sleep and really be a part of these programs. And then it opens it up for when you do bring that donor through a program, it's just not talking about the program, but the program managers are excited to see the development professional. So the culture, this mission-driven, I find it to be one of the most important pieces to developing that strong culture, a strong development team, and thus the success of the team. That's my 2 cents.
Okay, I'm gonna dump a nickel in here then. I think what you both have said is really important, that people have to be committed to the mission of the organization. I work at Planned Parenthood, so you can imagine that we often have conversations when I'm hiring people here about issues that are very, very controversial for people. And so those are important conversations for us to have, and we do need to have staff who are committed to the mission, who are willing to be a part of the culture at our organizations and are interested in learning what that is. I'm always impressed by people when I'm interviewing them who actually ask, what's it like to work here? What's the culture like? How does it feel? What's the environment? Because I think I've been doing this for 30-some years. I think that actually is one of the most important things that you will find that will make it comfortable for a person to work in your organization. But I do think while we can teach skills, I think it's really important for us to have clear roles and responsibilities for staff that are set out very early in their tenure at your organization, to explain what the work processes are. We all have worked at different places, and the way we do things at one place is not always the way we do them at other places. So making clear to our new employees, this is what it takes to be successful here, and here's how we do these things. I think open communication and accountability are also some of the most important things here for retaining staff. To me, I speak to my staff when they do things well immediately, and when they don't do things well immediately, so that they know what's expected and they can give me feedback. You know what, you didn't tell me I needed to do it that way, Val, so let's figure out how to do it better the next time. And I just find that that's also a way of retaining staff by making them feel a partner with you, knowing who the boss is, of course, but still feeling like what they think and what they bring to the table is really important. But accountability and communication and having clear roles and processes defined from the beginning, I think, are really key.
Yeah, just to riff off that a little bit, Val, clear expectations, clear strategy, ability to measure. We want to be able to measure whether our strategy is working. So there's definitely a lot of art to fundraising, but we also need to incorporate the science, and there's a real need to be able to have the evaluation of how things are going. And I think a high-performing team is going to have a bit of that data-driven component to it, to not get lost in the data, but enough to be able to, again, measure. It can be motivational. It can also be able to show points of success. And the other overlapping component of this, and I've certainly seen this and experienced this, is whether or not, in my career, whether or not we have goals that are truly realistic. Are we overly optimistic? Are we also setting up too much expectation? Do we have the infrastructure to support the goals? Are we resourcing well? Are we resourcing smart? All those things are also kind of the nuts and bolts to a high-performing team. It also has a great effect, good or bad, on morale, and and all those things that end up impacting the culture.
Yeah, I love the ability for your team to be good at what they do. When Val spoke of accountability, I'm often reiterating to my team, it doesn't matter what other people say, how other people, program managers, CFO, the only responsible, you keep doing what you're doing, and the only person that you have to be accountable to is me. And I find that in my the last few months that people are worried. I don't believe any performing, let alone high performing team, has to be in a world that they feel comfortable in, that they feel, like you said, Val, about accountable, respected. I find over the last 15 years, I used to be in the office at 8:30, 8 o'clock, out of the office at 6 o'clock, and really I want you to do this, and be here, this. I find the world of development and the people that I've had that have worked for me, the more freedom that I give them to work from home. Some young mothers, and I've been questioned by the traditional chief development officer. You can't do that. I find the more freedom an individual gets to work, the more they work. Instead of a 6-hour day or even less. And I'm one that wanders from place to place, but I feel I'm getting 10 hours, 12 hours, and I'm getting emails at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning from people that I don't see for 3, 4, 5 days. But, that comfortable willingness to be open to their needs as an individual is important. It's a different world than the 9-to-5 world that I grew up in as a young development professional. I'm much more open to that freedom and trust that I have with my staff, and it goes a long way.
I think that's really true, Tom, and I appreciate everything that you just said because it makes so much sense to me. One of the things that I also think is important and that I would add to this list is, as the Chief Development Officer, and Tom sort of got to this to some extent too, you have to be willing to take the bullet for your team, if you will. So my team knows that when we're having the conversations about what worked well and what didn't, we're going to have an honest conversation between the two of us, and it's going to be just the two of us. I don't call people out in front of other people. I just don't think that's a good motivator for folks. But I think also for your team to know, you know what, if something goes wrong and we all know what happened, I'm going to be the one who's going to take responsibility for it because I'm the Chief Development Officer, and if it went wrong, it's because I'm in charge and I'll take the heat for it. And I think my team truly does appreciate the fact that they know no matter who it is, from a board member to the CEO, whomever it is, to a donor, if something gets messed up, and sometimes things happen that we don't anticipate, we haven't planned for, that I'm going to be the one who's going to pick up the phone or go to the meeting or take responsibility and try to fix it so that it doesn't come back on them.
Yeah, that's really great, because what we're really talking about in any team, regardless if it's a development team, we're really talking about a couple things. Trust, first and foremost, and if you have a team that trusts each other, that trusts the lead, I find that the team will go pretty far for you. And the other part is, particularly when it comes to fundraising, there can be a lot of ups and downs throughout the year. And part of our jobs as the leaderships of development teams are to really be a buffer for our staff on that roller coaster. We want to be transparent and want to make sure that our teams have information, but there's times where we also have to make sure that we are really flattening out that roller coaster for them, because those emotional highs and lows are also going to potentially burn folks out. So I think that's a good part of hopefully being a really solid leader, is to be able to provide the resources, build that trust, have their back, like Val is saying, but also be able to keep them out of those waves that happen.
Great. So moving along here, we've talked a bit about the importance of connecting staff to the mission of the organization. So as we move to the next slide, what we're talking about is attracting high performers here, kind of a critical issue, and how do you find the best development staff for your organization? And so, sure.
Easy. You surround yourself with type A personalities.
Type A personalities.
Yeah. I'm a creative type.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a great organizational person. But high performance is, type A personality. It's been great for me. And they're always exceeding my expectations. And many without any experience in the world of development, but you just give them, give them the opportunity to succeed. They'll take and run with it.
Got it.
Yeah.
So as we, in our survey data, some of the interesting responses that we received from people were things like inspirational leadership, which ranked highest at 61% of respondents saying that it was the most important thing in attracting top people. Certainly salary is an evergreen topic as well, and a selection that was about 50% of respondents said was important. Organization's reputation, also very important at 47%. And then as we looked down, surprisingly, mission of organization was a little bit lower, and benefits was on the bottom. So it really looks from a leadership perspective like attracting high performers, having inspirational leadership is quite an important thing to have. Any thoughts around those responses or rankings, or others that may be important?
Val? I like when you lead.
Okay. Well, I guess what I was thinking of, I don't have any particular things to add, except I would say a couple things that I have utilized to find good performers, and one of those is my networks. Because I have been in this area now for 26 years. I have a lot of people I know who are fundraisers. I'm in a book club with fundraisers. I have been on the board of the AFP chapter here in DC, and all of those kinds of things. And so I do have a great network of people that I can just say, you know what, I'm looking for X kind of person. Who do you know? How do I find them? So that's one of the things I think that's important, is really building networks. So do connect to those local professional organizations. Go to those meetings where fundraisers gather. Arrange your own if you are in a smaller community. Set up a fundraising program, an afternoon on a topic that is of importance to people in your area. Those kinds of things can really be helpful to broadening your network of both colleagues and also potential employees. The second thing I would say is something that Marion and I have talked about, so it's a way of utilizing search to find the right people. And firms like Campbell and Company and others tend to only focus on those highest levels, the chief development officer or the CEO or those really senior positions, because it makes the most financial sense for a consulting firm. But if you can persuade a local or regional firm to help you with, say, the major gift or I'm looking for a corpse and founds person right now, with those key people in your organization, if you can persuade someone to help you with that, they tend to have such a great database of people that they can be really helpful if you can make a good friend. And I actually happen to have been able to do that, so that's the reason I'm saying that it can be done if you have a good relationship with a local or regional search firm. You may be able to persuade them to help you do a search that they wouldn't typically do. So those would be my two suggestions.
I hired two leadership positions within my department recently, one at a director level and one at a manager. Director level was somebody that I had worked with years ago. I've been working on her for a couple of years to join the team. Finally got her to join the team. Really great that I had direct experience with her, knew it was going to be a good fit, knew that she had the skill set. The other position, a manager level, I actually had experience for the first time where we went out to LinkedIn, and I was not receiving the resumes for the skill level and the fit that I was hoping for. So for the first time, we went out into LinkedIn, and my HR director and I, and started looking at some of the folks out there that were in the local area that might be a fit. So we got a couple of folks who said, yeah, I'd be interested in talking with you. I ended up hiring one of those folks. So that was kind of unusual, the first time that I really had to go out there and do something that's pretty anonymous compared to, recruiting someone or just generally bringing somebody in from a regular process through, posting it on AFP and so forth. So that was a new resource for me that is working out beautifully.
Yeah, it's interesting. I guess I'm real old school. I'm on LinkedIn, but never use it. And I know more and more colleagues that are doing that. It's interesting. I come from a sales background way back before development 28 years ago. If it's a major gifts officer, I don't look for major gift experience at all. I look, what's their sales background, and do they want to change their career? I like people, it's a real easy career to convince people to change their path, and really, instead of the for-profit world and getting up and you don't know where the money's going to the non-profit world. And I've had some really wonderful people make that decision. And the attracting, the salary benefits, obviously big to anybody. I've never been an inspirational leader, so I know they don't come, but certainly the CEO, from my standpoint, must be inspirational for me to make a commitment to a nonprofit. Otherwise, it's been a waste of my time and effort for those couple that I have worked for. But I just look for, again, individuals, type A personalities, but experience in, major gifts officers got to close the deal. The salesperson, especially working 100% commission, which I did, for 4 years, I know they can close the deal because they don't put food on the table for them. But I do have to look at LinkedIn more, and other social media, because the opportunities are there. And then, of course, because I'm sitting next to Mary, and of course, contact Campbell and Company. That's a good point too. So.
The thing that you mentioned, Tom, that I think is worth underscoring is don't necessarily look for the traditional background. And so the thing I would add to that is also look within your organization. Another important aspect of a culture is whether or not people who are shown dedication, who are connected to the mission, who are a good fit with the culture, to bring those folks into development department, even if they're coming from other departments within the organization. I think that also shows a good aspect within an organization that they're willing to promote within and give people the opportunity to, as you said earlier, Tom, a lot of these components that people can learn. A good mentor, there's all sorts of opportunities for people to learn the more mechanical parts of fundraising, but there's a huge component of fundraising that is really about the person and their soft skills. And so if you already have somebody within the organization who's showing interest in development, to be able to have the opportunity for them to shadow someone or learn more, sit with the organization's leadership and development department, but also be able to think about, hey, who are those folks that already are showing connection and to the mission? And those are folks that often can be turn out to be some of your best fundraisers.
Agreed, 100% agreed.
So once we have these high performers in the organization, I think the key is to keep them and develop them in ways that are beneficial not only to them but to the organization. And so as we looked at the average tenure, there were some interesting things that came out of the survey. 64% of those surveyed said that the average tenure of their development staff is 2 years or less currently. 28% said 3 to 4 years, and a very small number said greater than 6 years. So it looks like from those who are out there today, we're dealing with very kind of young tenured development staffs.
Not necessarily young, Lee.
Young tenured.
Young tenured. That I agree with. Yeah.
So, as we looked at some of those keys to retaining and cultivating, what we heard were some of the following: effective onboarding strategies and making people feel like they're immediately integrated in the organization. Having programs in place for professional development, making staff feel valued, and we've talked a little about that today as well, and then finally setting realistic goals for the development team, and then making sure they have the ability to make impact. So those were some of the things that came up, and I know Michelle and Val, you certainly had mentioned to me earlier they had some thoughts around this important topic as well.
Val, why don't you start?
There are just a couple things I would just add to support the items that are listed here. I mentioned already the Association of Fundraising Professionals, AFP. I also served on the board of our National Gift Planning group here in Washington at one point when I was doing plan giving. So I think making sure that your staff have the opportunity to participate in those kinds of professional training sessions where they have a chance to network with colleagues, to go to sessions and hear, you know, some of the nuts and bolts stuff, but also to just have an opportunity to talk to people who are doing this similar work to what they're doing and to expand their own networks. I think that's really important. We also, I try to find in my budget, it's not easy, and I'm sure it's not for many of us, funds to provide training opportunities for staff, so that if we're, for example, going to add a new module to our Razor's Edge system, I want to make sure that my development associate who's responsible for all of our gifts processing has a chance to go to those sessions, so she feels like what she does is important. She's not just taking the gifts and making copies of the checks and sending out the acknowledgement letters, but that what she does is so important to us that we're going to invest in making sure she has all the skills that she needs. I think making our staff feel valued is one of the things I've already talked about, you know, telling them how their work is important as I'm asking them to do it. Oftentimes you say to somebody, could you just get me that information about that donor or about this foundation or this group of people, and you don't really tell them why. So I find it's always helpful to say, and this is why I need it, and this is how I'm going to use it. And that helps them to understand, okay, that's why this is important. And then finally, I think the making an impact. Let our staff know as often as you can how their work matters, what difference it's made to the organization, and why it's so important.
That's so great, Val, because, you know, one of the things that we hope to do in practice is to be able to talk to our donors about what difference they're making. We need to take a step back and make sure that we're telling our development staff exactly that same message. So I think that's just brilliant. A couple of things I'll add. We've talked a little bit about making sure that, you know, we're providing goals that are realistic. We're providing resources to meet those goals, connecting people to mission, not assuming that mission is enough to keep folks. A few of the things I'll add. One is to make it part of the staff's own responsibility to own their development, meaning where is it that you want to go? What are things that what direction would you like to go, even if it's outside of the development department and fundraising? We try to integrate that into our regular check-ins a couple times a year at least, and allow the staff to be able to say, you know what, I'm actually going kind of interested in this direction, and to be able to support that. The other thing that I try to do is to be able to find out from staff, from their perspective, what makes them feel valued. I think it's one of the things that we can't assume, and it's a question that doesn't really, very few people have had asked in the workplace in particular. How is it that you feel valued? And that gives me some insight, because for most people it's not about the paycheck. For a lot of people it is around what Val was just saying, to be able to have input and feedback about how they're doing and what difference they're making. Something Tom talked about earlier, which I am a real advocate for, is that treat the employee holistically. If they've got a kid in school and they just got a call from the school nurse saying they got to come and pick them up, you have a culture that they feel like they're not going to have to work until midnight in order to make up the time they lost to go take care of their child. That we think of them holistically. And I also have the situation I think Tom talked about, where for some reason I have a whole bunch of type A people. Sometimes my biggest concern is making sure that I tell them to go home and to stop working. And that actually, on the surface as a CDO, is like, you know, this is great. But at the end of the day, you know, we're running a marathon here, and we have to make sure that we take care of ourselves. I have to be a role model for that as well. So part of reducing turnover, I think, is just making sure that we have that perspective that people are coming in with families and things outside of the workplace, and that we respect and honor that. The other thing I will add to that, though, is that my staff know that I'm going to treat them like a professional. That is the assumption that I'm going to have when they're hired. Now, if there's situations where maybe they're not acting as professional around handling their schedule and so forth, that's a different situation. But we start off at that level of trust. And all those things are really showing and giving signals to folks that, yeah, you matter, what you're doing is mattering, matters to us, matters to me, and that you're feeling valued here and that you are an important part of this team.
Yeah, I love what both of you just said. The other thing that I do in almost the first week that I bring somebody on board is how do I help you to take over my job? How do you, if you're a gifts writer and that's what, or foundation, corporation, grant writer, or an events person, you know, do you want to learn about planned giving? Do you want to learn about major gifts? I want my, and again, I have 8 team members or 10 team members. How do I give them the skills to be the best, not only in the discipline that they're involved in, but all disciplines of development? If they know that they're coming to work with not only the opportunity to be good at what they're doing currently, but that at one day they'll have an opportunity to take over a development staff. And that's my wish, and the type of person, obviously if they're type A, they want to control. So to give them every tool to control. I think also what you said about time, and I foolishly married a development professional, and we've stayed together because we never talked development, but my wife works long hours. I tell my team too, go home. I'm paying you, and the salary, if somebody's coming to work in the nonprofit world, salary is not going to be an incentive when you first begin. As you move on, you hope that it becomes that. But if I'm paying you for 37 and a half hours, get out of here. And even by yelling that, you're absolutely right. Again, the trust that builds up, and you know, when I say something like that to my wife, she's ready to kill me, but I get more work out of them. So, you know, I don't, if I'm paying you 37 and a half hours, I don't want you putting 80 hours a weekend. Or you're putting 80 hours a weekend, which most of my team does, I tell them take off on Friday. You know, so.
So right.
So now we're going to talk about the topic of turnover and some of the reasons why perhaps we experience turnover. We just mentioned a few minutes ago the stat from the survey about the tenure of development teams, and certainly we've talked a lot about, and just a moment ago, about some of the things that you can do in the organization to grow and keep people happy, but we will always face the issue of turnover, and as we sort of look at some of the root causes of why, I thought it would be interesting. Maybe we can share some thoughts from the panel on, you know, why are some of the most common reasons that we lose development staff? What are the true costs of that? And you know, where and how do we find good people to kind of fill their shoes? Marion, I know we were talking a little bit earlier about the true cost of turnover, and I think there are different ways to look at that metric, but I think you thought there was a number there that...
There's a general statistic that says it's 130% because it's that person's compensation plus the 30% of the, if you can measure the time that it takes to replace them. But there are some, you know, some other ones that have to do with what's the lost work product and how would you measure that, and also shifting work into other people while you're looking to replace that person, and there's that cost. And then, as we were also talking, there's the cost of that person ramping once they're hired. And those are some of the costs, I think, that aren't necessarily as easily quantifiable, but are part of the cost of what it means to have to replace someone.
Replace them. The cost of, because my philosophy is relationship. Dollars raised is relationship. How do you even begin that relationship again with their donor base? It's so difficult. I promote development and fundraising to every young kid in college. I just think it's a wonderful profession. I'm saddened to see the statistics, and I've known about them. I'm not very active in AFP and the other organizations, because when I was, it seemed to be a job finding club. I don't have a problem with lost staff. In 28 years, the problem I have, and it's always hard, but I have to do it, is somebody that's not performing, but to fire them, to let them go. I don't lose staff. They stay with me. You treat them with respect. You manage their time, everything that we've talked to this point. But if they're treated with respect, why would they leave? If you give them every opportunity that we've talked about today, why are they moving on? There's that I would look at myself as my problem. Inspirational leadership. I can't be much of an inspirational leader if people don't want to work for me. So I'm very interested, Val, the two of you, what you have to say on that, because it is sad, and it's sad that it's a 2-year tenure, 3-year tenure.
I think we all need to go work for Tom. Sounds like a good guy to work for. Nobody ever wants to leave.
And you, Val. And you, Val.
Well, I think that that's a really good point that you've made, that it is important to be a good leader, somebody that people want to work for, and I think that is important. I think we do have those pressures, though, that sometimes don't even come from us. And so, Tom, it sounds like you're able to sort of shield your staff from some of the things that I've seen in some other places I've worked, like the pressure of unrealistic goals, which we've talked about before. I think that's one of the reasons often that people become disenchanted and feel like, I can't possibly reach those goals. So, and it's going to make me feel bad when I can't. So why should I stay here? I think also the lack of opportunities for upward mobility sometimes, where you've got that person, like Tom just said earlier, that you've really you've talked to them when they come on board. They want to be in your chair, but that's going to take them some time. So there's some frustration that can come from that. But I think the real true cost is what Tom just talked about, and that's damaged and interrupted relationships between your organization and your donors. And I think that's the biggest challenge and really almost crisis for us in fundraising, is that when our staff leave, our major gift officers and planned gift officers in particular, those relationships that they may have built with someone, even if it's only for 2 years or 4 years, folks get used to seeing the same person. So it's good to make sure we're holding on to our good, strong fundraisers so that they can help us build those relationships.
Yeah, exactly that. Oftentimes it's the fundraising team that is the face of the organization for thousands of people, not just the donors, but, within the whole community. And so one of the things that I think we've heard over and over again is that reputation of the organization is going to be a big attractor. Certainly there's considerations around salary, but a lot of it is going to be reputation and the environment. And, the number one question I get from people who are interviewing to work at Fair Start is, tell me about what it's like to work here. And we have a pretty competitive environment right now in the greater Seattle area for fundraisers. So again, that's why we want to make sure that we are investing in making sure that salary isn't the reason people pass us by, and we're the good potential staff. So I think that's something that's a shared responsibility by the whole leadership of the organization, if not everyone in the organization, to think about how are we able to attract people to work in this organization, period, at all levels. But particularly for us, it's very acute when it comes to those folks who are coming in to fundraise. And then the other thing that was mentioned too, I just want to underscore, is there is actually something really great that happens when you talk with folks about why people are leaving. If it's for the reasons that Val had mentioned, the organization may not be growing as fast as this person was ready for the next point of their career. Maybe we've actually supported someone in developing a different career opportunity that doesn't fit within where they're at now. And that can actually be something really positive that does show that what we're not trying to do necessarily is keep everyone here. There may be times where it's best for them as an individual that we help them move on to their next opportunity, and to be able to modularize that so that it's still, when you have good people leave, it still hurts. it hurts morale, it can hurt the team, but that we're also really looking at that as, but look, we also help this person and it's an individual, and that's one person that's leaving the organization that hopefully is going to speak very well of it and going to somehow stay connected as well, and maybe someday come back as a volunteer or a staff member or a donor.
Great. I know we're coming up on the top of the hour, and we have one more topic we want to get through very quickly, and then we also want to take time for a few questions. We may go 5 minutes over here. So as we look at the idea of succession, and we just mentioned, about finding good people to fill the shoes of others, you see a statistic there that's 66.7%, and that's kind of a staggering statistic from the group when we think about what it represents, which is the number of those surveyed who said that they were not prepared for any succession on the development staff. I think it's specific to the CDO. Only 22% said they were somewhat prepared, and 0% said they were prepared. So obviously, in terms of thinking about succession, bench strength, how to continue to have a robust development team in place after exits is a serious concern for lots of you who are on the webinar today. And I wonder if our group of panelists here might talk a little bit about the idea of succession, what perhaps are some strategies that folks could be thinking about, or things they might be able to put in place, and when really is a healthy time for CDO or development staff succession to be thinking about that stuff.
Val?
Okay, I guess it's something.
Over to you. You're the leader, Val.
Well, two things I would say, that, and it goes back to what I just said about what I think is the most important concern that I have when we lose our staff, major gifts, and institutional staff as well, our foundation and government relations folks. You have to have good record keeping so that when the next person does come in, at least the knowledge about the relationship and the connection and the contacts with the donors don't get lost. So I think having a good CRM system in place so that you can record all of the contacts and interactions you have with donors is key. The other thing is communicating with the donors. If you have a major gifts person who leaves and they had lots of contacts with people, or it doesn't matter if they had lots, just let the relationship, the people with whom this staff person had a relationship, know that they're no longer there and who's going to take care of them now. Whether that is on an interim basis, the CDO, that's fine. But I think just communicating that, this person is no longer with the organization. We know you've had a strong relationship with him or her, and we want you to know that you are important to us. This is what they're doing now. If that's a story you can or would want to tell, we're very proud that they've been able to take this new step, and here's how we're going to continue to maintain your connection to our organization. 2 cents.
I think to answer the question, first of all, I love the graphic in this slide. But when is a healthy time for the CDO or development staff succession? We should always be succession planning in the background. And that's everything from making sure that we don't have just one person who owns it all, that has all the information, that there's cross-training involved, there's shared information. I always am thinking I have, hopefully, knock on wood, no plans to leave where I'm at for a very, very long time. But I'm always thinking about the what if and who on my team would be able to step in if I was to be gone, because you want that continuity. The other part is then you're thinking about building the leadership for the staff that are on your team as well and giving them opportunity to grow and lead. And that's a part of making sure that they're involved in big decisions, everything from budgeting to the strategic planning. And so I think it's an activity that should be happening in the background all the time.
And to allow staff to take ownership and to be able, as the CDO, to step back. So we started an advisory group, and I have 2 staff that I'm kind of grooming for the future. they run with it. You know, they prepare the agenda, they do the minutes, they run the meeting. I sit there and listen, and they're working with you know, our top board people in a whole other group. Allowing them to take ownership has been important. The other thing that I haven't been able to convince other CEOs to do, but in our organization, which is $54 million and 600 employees, is to institute a leadership program. So we've identified 8 leaders within all of Easter Seals, and then they work with a professional and go through professional leadership training. And I was able to get one of my team members in that group. But it at least begins to start and makes those individuals excited about the future. And I'm working with a 66-year-old CEO, and he knows it's time for that. So that program's been really, really good for us as an organization. So good luck.
Great. Well, I think that concludes really the content portion of the webinar today, but if those of you who'd like to stay on for a few minutes, we're going to answer a couple of questions that have come across in the last hour, and one of them is quite interesting, and it's directly related to a statistic we found when we were surveying you about turnover and how important salary is in the turnover process. Nearly half of those who responded said that salary was one of the main issues for the loss of development staff. And the question specifically asks about entry and mid-level staff who are leaving for more pay in other organizations, and how can you make the case for recognizing high performance with better than a cost of living raise when the organization's culture simply doesn't support larger increases. Any thoughts from the panel on that?
Yeah, I have many thoughts. I try to, with my team, you're in the nonprofit world, and I fight very hard to get a salary that I believe is going to be competitive in the for-profit as well as the nonprofit world, but for the nonprofit world. So I have to work and build a case to our CFO and CEO on the importance, if we're going to continue to grow, that we can be competitive. But really, in the end, it's a nonprofit. You know, we're facing 8% cut. State of Illinois is ranked 50th out of 50 states in developmentally disabled. You know, it's hard to squeeze anything other. It's hard to squeeze the cost of living increase. So you try to do it, and I try to do it in other ways. Days off, work from home, just to try to keep them as interested as possible without moving on. So
great. Well, you know, another question's come across about metrics, and we talked a little bit earlier about tying development staff to metrics and making sure they're clear and reasonable, and et cetera. This question asks, regarding clear major gift officer metrics, we're defining an ROI of 10 as a minimum. That's total gifts compared with salary benefits. What is the industry average expectation in this area?
Val?
I think that's a Marion question.
Oh, that's a good answer, Val.
And I don't know if Marion has a great answer for you, frankly, for that question. I was actually hoping that Michelle was going to pick this up. And I'm not bouncing it around. I just don't know that I have the best,
right,
a great answer for you.
Can you run the question again, please?
Sure. The question asks, regarding clear major gift officer metrics, we, meaning the person who's asking the question, their organization, are defining an ROI of 10 as a minimum, and that's total gifts compared with salary and benefits. What is the industry average expectation in this area?
Interesting question. So I know that there's some expectations around major gifts officers that, a full portfolio is about 150 people, that you should be raising 3 times your salary as a general metric. So I think those can be guidelines. At the end of the day, I think there has to be a lot of work behind that to make sure that there's a strong enough portfolio for that person to be able to, again, realistically meet those expectations. The thing, too, that I think is important for educating folks is that, another important kind of measure to keep in mind is 6 months to a year before you really start seeing somebody who's new to the organization as a fundraiser to be able to start showing some of that return on investment. This is relationship building. And so I think really trying to measure people's expectations. You make an investment in your development department, you should expect a year, before you really start seeing that come into fruition. And so, again, I think that's where we can get tangled up with, hey, we have a fundraising goal of X. I gave you the resources. What's going on? We have to think about this in the larger context that these, again, it may take time to make these relationships where we're going into a dating mode, let's say, with a donor. We're not going to ask them to marry us on the first meeting. So we have to give time for that. At the same time, we need to also be measuring what the expectations are. So, how many touch points do we want to have? What are our goals, and track those so we know, again, that we are making progress. There's a lot of science and art mixed in, like I said before. But at the end of the day, we can have some metrics and some guidelines and so forth, but we also have to make sure that we're providing the resources to allow somebody to succeed.
Can I just add one quick point to what Michelle has said, and I think what she said is absolutely on point. What I would say to the person who asked the question is, what I have found is it's more useful to sit with your major donor prospect list and your major giving officers and figure out who are the real people that you can realistically solicit, and decide what the goals should be based on who your prospects are, not on some standard that's out there somewhere, because that's not terribly helpful. I think sitting with people and making them feel a part of the process of who's going to be asking how much, when, and all of that, doing all of that strategy work, which takes a lot of time, but I think that's the more reasonable way of getting to realistic goals. And also then to what Michelle said, the goals don't just have to be how much money you raise, but what are the touch points along the way.
Well, on that note, I think we have a wrap, and on behalf of Campbell & Company, we'd like to thank all of you, including our terrific panelists today, for joining us and sharing our insights, as well as you for those questions that you've sent across. If we didn't get a chance to answer your specific question, we are certainly happy to do so if you'd like to shoot us an email. We also hope you'll take a minute and fill out a short survey on your thoughts about today's session. Those types of feedback certainly help us to improve sessions like this in the future. That survey should pop up on your screen as soon as this webinar concludes, and we also hope that you'll keep close to us and be a part of webinars that are coming up in the future. The next one you can certainly see here is called Fundraising Communications 3. It's on February 10th. Engaging volunteers with your case. Thanks again for attending, and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.